I'm Elijah Henderson with Cryptid Studies Institute. Today we're on the outskirts of Greenbrier, Tennessee, on the banks of Carr Creek. What do you get if you mix a murderous witch, a Tasmanian tiger, a Sasquatch-type creature, and a Shunkaworkin, a name that in the tongue of the Laue tribe means carries off dogs, and a hyena? Give up? I'll tell you what you get, and that is Robertson County, and that is where we find ourselves today. Robertson County is located in Middle Tennessee and was established around 1796. It has an area of about 477 square miles and more than 300,000 acres, and most of that is rural farmland and forested areas. Robertson County seems to be an area that is plagued with high strangeness, to say the least, and I'm not sure if it is because the land is part of the area that was referred to by the great Cherokee war chief Dragging Canoe as the dark and bloody ground, or if something else keeps drawing the mysterious and the macabre to their doorstep. As far as I know, Robertson County has had issues with creatures and the supernatural since at least 1817, when a demonic entity began to torture and torment the Bell family in what is the most frightening and prolific haunting in the history of the world, in my humble opinion. The so-called Bell Witch Ultimate is said to have killed the Bell family patriarch John Bell, and at some point we here at Cryptid Studies Institute aim to do a very in-depth Nightmare Nugget or History's Mystery segment on the subject of the Bell Witch, but that's for another day, because today we're discussing the creatures of Carr Creek. Carr Creek streams and tributaries run throughout Robertson County from near Springfield to Greenbrier, and the Greenbrier area will be our focus today. We came to report on a rather aggressive Bigfoot creature, which we thought was the alleged critter of Carr Creek, but it appears that we're wrong. The true critter that has been stalking this region since at least the 1960s is said to be something closely akin to either a wolf, a hyena, a Tasmanian tiger, or the Shunkaworkin that I mentioned earlier, which I find interesting because we have been in contact with a gentleman from Dover, Tennessee, who claims that he saw a Shunkaworkin on his property, and that it often comes to torment and harass his dogs. So we may combine an upcoming episode to focus on the Shunkaworkin type creature from Robertson County and the one in Dover at the same time, because it makes for a fascinating read, and you can read about the Carr Creek critter because it was the subject of multiple newspaper articles from the 1960s. It was reported on in both the Tennessean and the Robertson County Times. For today, however, I think we'll keep our attention squarely on the bipedal humanoid creature that has cut a swath of bloody destruction and animal mutilations throughout the county, going all the way back to the late 1960s, where pets and livestock has been mauled and mangled. Horses have been found dead in the creek with half of their faces torn away, dogs torn asunder and hung in trees, and it all seems to be the work of a troop, if that is the proper term, of aggressive and violent Bigfoots. The Bigfoots in this area since the 60s seem to have very menacing proclivities and have been terrifying local residents for decades. One assault goes back more than 50 years to when a young libidinous couple parked their car in a remote wooded area for a make-out session. All was going well for the young lovers in their backwoods secluded Shangri-La, and the whole world seemed to fall away as they were caught up in the throes of passion, until they began to hear deep guttural grunts coming from right outside their car. Looking up, the teenage couple was instantly ripped from blissful paradise into a terrifying nightmare. Staring into the vehicle, watching them making love, was a gigantic, hideous, and hairy humanoid creature that was trying to gain entrance into the car. It seemed to be in an agitated state and was grunting furiously, and then it started screaming and beating the roof of the car. The two teens, in a horrified frenzy, began to dress as the young man simultaneously threw the car in reverse and sped away with the hulking creature pursuing and giving them chase. Stories like this are not at all uncommon, as many a young lover has described similar experiences. Some accounts of contact with these Carr Creek creatures are much darker, and I would like to relate one of those to you right now. And in fact, this case has for some reason always stuck out to me. The encounter took place in the late 90s and the fall of the year when a seasoned hunter, whose name will be withheld for privacy, lived in Greenbrier. He went out for a day of deer hunting on his family farm. The man had gotten a late start, and it was around lunchtime when he arrived at his hunting destination and began to wander around and survey the area. He hadn't been there long when he came across a large 8-point buck with its throat ripped out and other body parts torn away. At this point, the hunter, whom I will just call Tom, began to get an eerie feeling as a chill crept up his spine, and he felt like he was being watched. So he began to slowly back away and start making his way back to the safety of his vehicle that was parked several hundred yards away. As Tom started to make his strategic exit, an ear-splitting scream or roar began to emanate in the forest around him, causing him to quicken his pace as he headed back to his truck. But as he made his way back, he could see out of his peripheral vision that something was following and stalking him through the wooded landscape. He couldn't see it clearly, but he could tell that it was big and black and stood 7 foot tall or taller. Tom got in his truck, locked the door, and reached down to shift his truck into 4-wheel drive. And when he looked back up, he got the scare of his life, because standing right in front of him was, as he described it, the ugliest thing I've ever seen. He said it had a similitude to a gorilla, but the facial features were just wrong. And I wonder if the creature was the product of inbreeding, because it seemed to Tom as somehow deformed, and it was overly aggressive. It stands to reason that if there's not a viable selection of breeding stock, and these creatures are having to interbreed, then there could be some genetic similarity issues. And I'm not saying that this is the case, but if this creature was deformed, then it could be a possibility. The creature, according to Tom, walked upright and did not walk on its knuckles. The monstrous menace stared at Tom and began to scream furiously at him. And at this point, Tom slammed his truck in gear and sped away. But he didn't make it far before he was forced to stop, because lying across the roadway which he had used to access this area of the farm was a large tree, and that tree was not there earlier. Tom was now trapped. Tom, as quickly as he could, called for one of his good friends who lived up the road to come and bring a chainsaw so that they might cut and saw up the obstruction and he could reach a safe distance from his fearful pursuer. Tom's friend Ted showed up about 20 minutes later, and they began to cut up the tree that was barring his escape. And as they set about to remove the blockade, they noticed that all around the fallen tree were large, bare, human-like footprints that were much larger than Tom's size 14 footprint. The tracks around the fallen barricade told a terrifying story that finally started to sink in. The creature had set a trap for Tom by blocking his route of escape and fleeing to safety. What did the beast have in store for Tom if he was trying to trap him? Did this mean that the creature was methodical and intelligent? It was smart enough to push over a tree to prevent his escape. Did the creature intend to kill Tom if his friend hadn't shown up and helped him move the tree? As Tom and Ted started to leave, the Deep Woods demon began to scream and shriek, causing Ted to go pale as the blood drained from his face. Tom asked Ted if he knew what the monstrosity was, and Ted said no, but it had killed several of his cows, but he never told anyone because he thought people would think he was crazy. Tom and Ted jumped in their trucks and raced out of the backwoods area of his farm and back around to the main road where one of Tom's fields butted up against a neighbor's property. Tom, who was feeling better now, noticed that there were a number of deer standing in his field, and he, being the relentless hunting addict that he was, decided that since he was now safe, he would go ahead and bag himself a deer. Tom stopped his truck and grabbed his rifle and began to take aim and level it at one of the deer, when all at once they started to panic and ran away, and in just a moment Tom saw why. Rushing out of the forest, Tom saw the same malevolent creature that had harassed him just a short time earlier, and the beast was now heading towards his neighbor's barn, in which he had a recently born foal and its mother. Tom worried that the creature might harm his neighbor John's livestock, so he took a couple of shots at the creature in an attempt to frighten it away. But the beast merely stopped and glared, with a seething anger at Tom, who jumped in his truck and sped away. Tom and Ted rushed to John's house and told him what had transpired, and then they drove on to Tom's house to attempt to contact the Fish and Game Commission and speak with the game warden. While the call was being made, they began to hear shots being fired over at John's, so they determined to take all of Tom's guns over and help John defend his place. Tom and Ted came out of Tom's with a load of guns, and as they made their way to the truck, Tom's dogs, which consisted of a Rottweiler and 2 large chows, began to whine and ran under the porch, hiding in fear. As the whimpering dog hid beneath the porch, the creature roared again, and this time it was very close. Without warning, the enraged bipedal beast charged out of the woods, a mere 40 or 50 feet from Tom and Ted, who without a second thought opened fire on the bloodthirsty monster, wounding it badly enough for it to fall to the ground and crawl away, leaving a bloody trail. Tom and Ted ceased fire as the creature disappeared in the underbrush. Ted and Tom waited for the game warden to arrive, and they told him what had taken place, and he stated that he had recently been called out on a multitude of different occasions in regard to the same kind of encounters in the area. The game warden wasn't exactly sure what to make of their account until they showed him the crawl marks, blood, and footprints, which they followed deep into the forest, where they linked up with more footprints of similar creatures, and they all disappeared further down the creek. A short time later, Tom's beloved Rottweiler was found dead, hanging in a tree with its throat torn out. And since that time, there have been many more animal mutilations in the area, with their throats ripped out and torn asunder. To this day, as far as we can tell, the beast still roams the desolate landscape here in Robertson County. Once again, I'm Elijah Henderson from Cryptid Studies Institute, or Cryptid SI for short, and I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Nightmare Nuggets of Cryptid Terror. And if you like these true accounts in miniature episode form, then please take a moment to subscribe to our Facebook, Instagram, and our YouTube channel, Cryptid Studies Institute. It really helps us out. And make sure to click that little bell icon in the bottom right hand side to be notified of when we post a new video, and even share these videos. We upload videos every week barring some disaster, so keep checking in for new and interesting content. And as I just said, please follow us on Facebook and Instagram. And make sure to check out our Blog Talk radio show, Cryptid Studies Institute. We have a show every Sunday night at 6:30 p.m. Central. We have a lot of exciting guests with amazing encounters to tell you about, so make sure to check that out. There'll be details on our Facebook page. And if you'd like to be a guest on that radio show, we'd love to have you. Check on our Facebook and our Instagram pages, and we'll have details regarding the show. And if you've had an encounter with some kind of a cryptid, like the critter of Carr Creek, a shunkaworkin, a dogman, a skinwalker, a wendigo, a sasquatch, or even a supernatural experience, and you'd like to tell us about it, we'd love to hear it. If you'd like for us to read your account for you, then please drop us a line and we'll make that happen. If you have any questions or inquiries regarding cryptids, send us a message or comment down below, and we'll do our best to help you out. See you next time.